Hey everyone, and welcome to another video. So I'm really excited to talk to you in this video because honestly, I really think this is a very important video, and I feel that recently I've had a pretty important moment of clarity in regards to how character arcs play into structure. So this may be where you are, right? So you've looked at story structure, right? You've watched me talk about Dan Harmon's story circle. You've watched me integrate the story circle onto, acts, act by act. You've watched me look at it scene by scene. You watched my how to write a short film video where I looked at it and this sort of stuff. And then also you've heard me talk about philosophical conflict, character beliefs, character arcs, these sorts of things. And so where you might have ended up is now you're sitting there, right, trying to write your script, trying to outline, and for some reason, structurally, you can kind of see it, and maybe you kind of have an understanding of what your characters believe and where you want them to end up, but you don't actually know where are the exact pieces in your story, or where are those moments of character change innate within that structure, right? So essentially, how do you plot the arc itself as we're looking at story structure? And so this is what I want to look at today, because I believe that you absolutely can plot this out. So let's take a look at what you have seen, I'm sure, a million times on this channel. This is your Dan Harmon story circle. So we have our character, right? Just to get this quick, we have the want, we have the unfamiliar situation, new problem, whatever you want to call it. We have the adapt, we have the get, pay, return, and the change is kind of tacked on to the end here, or the having changed, right? So when we're actually looking at this, the question is, where does the character go through change, and how do we create character arcs in structure? Okay, so here's how I want you to think about this, right? A big thing that is going to force your character to change is this idea of choice, okay? So it's not necessarily that they're doing a task, but what's going to happen is they're going to be in a situation where they're at a crossroads, right? And they hold their belief, and now they're sitting at a crossroads, and they have to either go one way or they have to go another way, right? And so in that moment, we get a better sense of who that character is based upon the choice that they make in that moment, right? So when we're thinking about how a character arcs, we need to understand what they believe, present the moment of change, and see what choice they make, right? So when we're looking at story structure, this is pretty clearly integrated. So here's kind of how this works, okay? In this first half of the story, okay, your character is holding their initial belief, right? So they're holding their initial belief, right? And so we set this up at the very beginning of the story where we ask, okay, what does our character believe, right? What do they believe? And usually this is tied clearly to what they want, right? So usually they have some sort of belief about what they want specifically, right? So they want something, they have a belief about how they get that thing or how they will go about that, whatever. And then this kind of sends them on their journey, right? So usually what happens here is the unfamiliar situation is usually kind of choice number one, okay? So this is where the character makes a choice that sends them out of their zone of comfort up here into the adventure world, so under this line here, into the adventure world, and this is kind of their choice to step into the adventure, right? And that's kind of choice one. Now, what usually happens is with this choice, they are still holding their initial belief, right? So they make this choice based upon the belief that they initially hold, and then they continue to adapt, still holding that belief, all the way to the point that they get that thing, right? So a lot of the times, this is where your character has gone all the way to here, holding their initial belief without really having the belief challenged. So At this point, this is where we begin to set up the actual change in the character's belief, okay? So now when we look at the 6, 7, and the 8, really just the 6 and the 7, this is where that change happens. So what happens is the character gets either what they want exactly or a version of what they want, or they realize that what they wanted was not the full fulfillment of the actual goal, right? All of these sorts of things. So essentially what happens is they get a version of what they want here, and then there's a pay, right? Whether this is something goes wrong or they have a realization that the problem is larger than they initially realized that it was, something like this. From this moment, this presents choice 2, okay? So this presents choice 2, and usually this is where the character is presented with a way of changing their belief, right? So they are presented with a choice, and then by making that new choice, they are growing as a character, right? So sometimes this is going to be super duper clear, and sometimes this is going to be like smaller pieces of choice kind of on the way to the larger big final choice, whatever. But usually this is how this is going to work. And so when we're looking at just a story, not even getting to screenplays yet, but when we're just looking at story, you want to think about it like that this is like the second choice, and then they make a choice based upon this. And if they're going through a change arc, this is where we see at the very least the initial change of belief. And then we go into the 7, which is now the character is acting on their new choice, right? So sometimes you can kind of see this in certain films when sometimes when you have like right before the final, arc of change or whatever, right before that sort of final moment, like as we're going into the end, we're going to go fight the bad guy. The character has pretty much changed their belief. And then usually what happens is you have that final moment of, will they really hold true? And then they do. And then we get our catharsis. And then that's the end of the movie. And so then this becomes more then each of the circles then go down into the acts. And so what happens is you then take this and then you say, okay, this is kind of, so act 1 through act 3, and you place a circle for act 1, act 2, part 1, act 2, part 2, act 3, and then there are pieces of the change that slowly is made until you get to the end moment where, we have our sort of final moment of Luke Skywalker in the cockpit. Is he gonna rely on the Force? Is he gonna actually do this? He makes a choice to do so, and we're good to go, right? But there are moments of change before this that lead us to this moment, right? So if we're thinking about Star Wars, just as I'm talking about it here, we sort of have the unfamiliar situation with Luke, which is that, the big pay. Excuse me. The unfamiliar situation would be more so that the droids come, right? C-3PO and R2-D2 come to end up at Luke's farm, but he's holding his particular belief up until here. Where he gets, he meets with Ben Kenobi. I'm kind of all over the place here. But he meets with Ben Kenobi, and this is kind of the get. And then the pay is that his aunt and uncle die, right? Forcing him to make a choice, right? What choice does he make? He says, I want to grow up, I want to go with you and be a Jedi like my father. Okay, boom. That is choice 2. Sending us into the beginning of Luke's arc, right? And that's not the end, but that sets us up to now, okay, now we're going into the next part of the story. Luke has begun his initial change. Now we're going into Act 2, where more change is going to happen until ultimately we get into the situation where we are at the Death Star, and again, he is in a situation where he's going to have to take this shot, and he is presented with another problem. Darth Vader is coming down on him. This is kind of the 6. Darth Vader is coming down on him. It all looks hopeless. And then he he gets well, actually, if we want to think about this scene-wise, I'm just rambling. I apologize. It would probably be more so that this is Darth Vader coming down on him at the 3. He gets what he wants when Han Solo comes in, but he still has to take the shot, right? So he's still... Just because Han Solo has, momentarily saved him from getting killed by Darth Vader, he still has to take the shot and make this thing happen. And so he's presented with the choice at the pay. Do you follow your targeting computer, or do you rely on the Force to make this thing happen? He chooses to rely on the Force, sending us into the 7. He gets what he wants. Boom. We have our climax. Everything's beautiful and hunky-dory. We go from there. There's some other examples that you can look at this working very, very clearly. When I did that video on how to write a short film, where I look at a Rick and Morty episode, and I'm essentially looking at the A plot of a Rick and Morty episode as if it was a short film. And what you see in that is Morty is presented with the unfamiliar situation of that Rick is selling weapons to this assassin, right? And so rather than just allowing that to happen, he adapts by going and trying to save the assassin's target, right? He gets what he wants, right? Holding his initial belief of there is, an absolute morality. We can't kill people indiscriminately, whatever. He gets his belief, or he gets what he wants when he saves Fart, right? The alien creature. And then he pays for it, which is suddenly everybody is, attacking them, coming after them, all this sort of stuff. And then suddenly all these other people are dying because he saves Fart's life, all these people in the city that they're escaping from. And then ultimately what happens is the real choice that Morty is forced to make is at the very end, where Fart is going to go into his dimension and then come back and destroy their entire universe, right? That's kind of what he says. And Morty, presented with this reality, makes the choice to kill Fart, changing his view on the world, changing his belief, and returning the story, resolving the conflict of the short or of the episode, and then the episode is over, right? So it follows this pattern. So if you want to really think about what is story structure, right? What is it? Story structure is the journey of how human beings change their beliefs, right? There is a rhythm to how we actually go from believing one thing about the world to shifting and believing a different thing, right? So there is a flow to how that operates. And ultimately, that is what we are looking at when we're looking at a story. When we're looking at a story, we're not looking at a concept. We're not even looking at a plot as much. These are the dressing for what really is happening here, which is a character changing their belief from their initial viewpoint to a different view. Another great example of kind of seeing this is in, Lord of the Rings, when we're talking about choice specifically here, right? In Lord of the Rings, in the first Lord of the Rings, Frodo, he wants to take the ring, he wants to save humanity, or not humanity, but he wants to save the world by doing his part to destroy the ring. And so he believes taking the ring to Rivendell is going to do that. He's gonna get it to Rivendell, and then the higher ups can take it from there. So we sort of go through an unfamiliar situation. He has to go on this journey. He makes the choice to go on this journey to Rivendell, holding his initial belief. He adapts to the different problems on the road. Ultimately, he gets to Rivendell, but then he pays a price. The ring cannot stay in Rivendell. It must keep going. Therefore, Frodo is now presented with another choice. It doesn't seem like anybody other than him is a good candidate to continue bringing the ring forward, and therefore he makes a choice to fulfill the true want that he is holding, which is to save the world, to destroy the evil that the ring is holding, this sort of thing. He believed he was going to do that by just getting it to Rivendell. That doesn't work, so he's presented with the new choice. He makes the choice to keep going, and then obviously we have the 2 other films that happen later. So that is how this is working. Hopefully this is a bit clearer to you. So as you are thinking about not only your story's plot structure, but also your character's arc and journey of their beliefs, I want you to be thinking about, okay, what choice is presented at the unfamiliar situation? what choice is presented at the 6, and how does the choice presented at the 6 change what the character believes because of the choice they make, assuming you actually have a change arc. Now, let's say you have a flat arc, or an arc where the character does not go through change. They will be presented with some sort of intense choice here, and they will stick with their original beliefs, right? They may struggle, they may be frustrated, these sorts of things, but ultimately they hold to their original beliefs. So you can look at this in something like The Martian is something I've talked about a lot. Unfamiliar situation. He's stranded on Mars. He wants to get home. He believes that he must persevere, keep working the problems. And if he can just persevere and keep working these problems, he can get home. That works up until he has a full plan for getting home. He's in contact with NASA. Everything seems to be working. And then the pay is that the hab explodes. His entire plan is shot, his crops all die, and it looks like he is going to die. So essentially the choice being presented here is he could give up and say, well, it's no longer possible, or he can continue to work the problem looking for a potential solution, even if that solution isn't there. So essentially the story becomes about, not giving up, continuing to solve problems and going forward. And that's such a big note right there, because and Martian does it so well, right? The Martian, has a pretty standard, you would say, theme of, don't give up, keep pushing, keep solving problems, that sort of thing. And what happens is it does it well, and you can do it like that well, but a lot of the times when we're talking about movies that feel, quote unquote formulaic, it's not that they have a formulaic structure as much as they are talking about a formulaic topic. They're talking about a character going through a belief change that is formulaic to us, right? So a lot of movies are handling this sort of belief change idea of don't give up, right? Don't give up, keep fighting, right? Every time the protagonist gets hit down by the bad guy and he's like, then we have this moment of, is evil really going to win? And the protagonist is like, no, I must make the choice at the 6 to not give up. And then you take down the bad guy, that sort of thing, right? That is where formulaic stories usually come from, because while that works, it's something we've seen again and again and again and again. And so if you really want to write a story that feels not formulaic, yet actually is following structure, you want to be thinking about what is a story, what is a belief journey, of change in beliefs, these sorts of things that I can send my character on. That's something we're not so familiar with. That's something we haven't seen 35 times, right? That is where you really start to make a cool movie. And that's also the hardest piece, because most of the time people have not even begun to develop the philosophical side of their brain. They're always just looking for, what's my concept? What's my structure? How do I send my characters through this? Or they have this sort of reactionary version, which is, I hate structure. It's only vibes. I'm just gonna plod my way through it and do it all, quote unquote, organically. And that doesn't really end up working super well either. So hopefully this is helpful. The goal of this, and this is so important, I'm literally gonna put this in my fundamentals of screenwriting playlist, because it's like, this is what it is, right? You want to attach the beliefs to the structure. The way that your character changes that belief is innate in structure, because clearly they're not changing, they're not going through change here, right? That doesn't make sense. Doesn't really make a ton of sense that they're going through change, maybe here, maybe a little bit, or they make the choice here, right? We make choices and we change beliefs based upon the problems, based upon things not being integrated in the way that we believe they should be. That's why the problem of the unfamiliar situation and the problem of the pay is where your character is making a choice that changes who they are. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If you're interested in working with me one-on-one to fix your screenplay, there is a link below this video. You can click that and hop on a call with me to talk about that. Other than that, if you made it this far, please give it a like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.